Hi, I thought today I'd show you a little bit about how you might sew some sort of a chevron, a braid that has various different names. I'm suggesting maybe a vertical column, or it might be a horizontal type thing. But I thought I'd just show you how we might just do one of these and how we're going to trim it down afterwards. So I've gone ahead, I'm using some 2.5 inch wide strips. Now they might be leftovers from a project, or you might have a whole new exciting roll of strips, or whatever it is, you might have cut your own from your own fabrics. And either way, I've used 2.5 inch wide strips. When we start off, we need a square, so it's a 2.5 inch square. And then when we start adding sides, we add one side, then we add the other. And I've chosen to do mine so that each of the little chevron stripes is the same fabric. You may have a different way of wanting to do it, but that's what I'm doing today. So I've gone ahead and cut some strips into some lengths. So because I'm using 2.5 inch strips, I've got a 2.5 inch square. My first strip goes on here, and I'll show you in a second how we're doing that. And it's 2.5 inches by 4.5 inches. It's to make the size that I'm making. You can make different sizes. The other strip is 2.5 by 6.5. So really we only need one of these to get started. So for as many columns as you're doing, then you're going to need one of these. Otherwise you need an even number of the 2.5 by 4.5 and 2.5 by 6.5. So we'll get started, and I'll show you how we get started. So I'm just going to have my 2.5 inch square, my 4.5 inch long strip, put them right sides together, and I'm just going to sew that 1/4 inch seam as you would normally. So it's not the full length of the 4.5. And there we are, that wasn't hard. We've done that little bit. I'm going to suggest that you press as you go, because it really does help things sit nicely. And I like to press from the right side and press that over. Now I've pressed away from the square. In the longer term, it's better if the seams are going that way. A little bit fiddly when you've got bits sitting out there. Don't panic too much about that, because most of that will be trimmed off. So there is a little bit of trimming that goes on. So we've got our square, we've got our first stripe, and now we're going to pop the next stripe on. So I'm going to go ahead and put that on there. I'm going to sew that seam till the end of the square. So there's lots of different ways of doing these chevrons or braids. You can put squares at the top point, you can make them narrow, wide, lots of things. But we're just doing 2.5 inch strips today. That one done, and I'm going to press that now. So now we've got that sitting nicely on there. Just trying to press that seam so that it sits flat at the end of the square there. And we've got a nice looking piece here. We've got our square, short strip, long strip. So now we just continue up as long as you want to make your strip, putting on the short one first every time, and then the long one afterwards. So I'll just do a couple more so that you can just get the hang of that. So you probably already have it. And again I'm going to press. And then I've got my next long strip, and as I said, you could mix your colours around. You could do a really scrappy one, you could just alternate 2 colours. To the pressing. So I think you've got the hang of how that goes now. Start with a square, short strip, long strip, short strip, long strip, pressing between each one so that you end up with this nice chevron style stripe going up, which you can see that I've got here. And then I'm going to show you how to trim that. So I mentioned that you might want to just do 2 colours, so I've started doing one here just in 2 colours. This is kind of fun. And again, it could be going across the quilts, could be going up and down, it could be going up the other way, whichever way you like really. Could be going diagonally. Goodness me. So many choices in life. So I've already started, whoops, the runaway strip. I've already started trimming this one here so that you could see what happens. So these are the bits obviously not trimmed, but we want it trimmed so there's a nice straight edge. So if you were making strips like this, multiples of them, and you were wanting to join them together, you'd be able to match the seams at the join. If you didn't want to, you could put a sashing between, or it might be just one strip on its own. There's lots of things in that area, but we're just putting it together today. So you may find that with your ruler you can do that, but you most likely, if you have one, would like to use a longer ruler for this so that you can keep things nice and straight. So with these measurements that I've used on this today, we're going to end up with a cut strip 6 inches wide. So it'll finish at 5.5 inches when you sew it into your quills. But just for the trimming, I'm going to lay the ruler on here. I've got the edge coming through the little corners so that we're cutting through those, right through those corners. And you should also be able to see, and this ruler's got a 1/2 inch line on it, you should be able to have line up, because we know we're cutting to 6 inches wide, we want that 3 inch to go up that center point here. So it was probably easier to show you on this strong colour piece. So we've got a couple of things going on here. We want to keep this corner lined up on the edge, and we want to keep our center line lined up on the points. And then we just trim off those little triangles on the edge. It's really not that hard. And there we've got a nice straight edge. So now we need to do the other edge as well. Same thing. You can turn it round. And this is where a longer ruler is helpful. If you can't do the whole thing because you've got 2 points to line up, you can just do a segment at a time. Or you could do what I've done and start doing some, add some more strips and then trim those. So I've got my 3 inch line coming up that center. I've got my little edge coming through these little corners here. It's all looking, this edge here, because it's already cut, is lined up. It's all looking pretty good. And that's how you trim it. So you could continue on making that longer. I could slice that off now and I'd have a nice straight top at the edge. There's lots of different ways. So I'll just trim this one as well so that you just see that again. So I'll start from the bottom here. If it's sitting as straight as you reasonably can, I'm going to put my 3 inch line up through my center there, and the ruler's not long enough to do the whole strip. I've got my little points sitting on the edge there. Trim off those triangles. Trim them as far as you reasonably can. Then you can move that down and finish trimming. So you've got this edge to line up to now, but always just keep an eye that your center's sitting right as well, because fabric moves around a bit. It doesn't always sit exactly where you think it should. Apparently it likes to think for itself. So I can come back and do the other side now. Lay that on. So another line you could line up now, because we know it's going to be 6 inches wide. If you can see through your ruler, you can line that edge on the 6. Make sure your 3 is sitting in that central line there. Make sure your edges are sitting all right over this side. Oh, it's looking pretty good. And just trim off those little corners. And that's how you can make a little chevron or braid, or however you like, using some 2.5 inch strips. So remember, this strip is going to end up 6 inches wide cut, so it'll be a 5.5 inch when you're ready to, when it's sewn in. Now if you're just trimming off the bottom edge here, because it's got to have a bottom, straight edge, same thing. You can just go straight through the corners of the little square where you join to, and make sure things are sitting nice and straight, and you'll have a really nice straight edge at the bottom. And the same thing will apply at the top. You can line it up. This is where the lines on the board are really handy, because you can line things up and you can position it so that you can get a nice straight edge there. So what you should be able to do here is, if your ruler has got a 1/4 inch line in from the edge, line that up with your little point so that you've still got your 1/4 inch seam allowance, make sure other lines are sitting straight, and you can slice that off. I'm not going to, because I'm going to add more to this strip. But that would be how you do that, so that if you have your 1/4 inch line through that point and you cut beyond that, it will sit beautifully, so that if you're joining it into something and you want that straight edge to be level, it will be level with your 1/4 inch points. So that was the little chevron. A couple of different colourway suggestions. 2.5 inch strips, cut the 2.5 inch square to start, 2.5 by 4.5 for the short length, 2.5 by 6.5 for the long length, trim to measure 6 inches wide, 5.5 inches finished. Have fun with your 2.5 inch chevrons. Thank you.